Good evening and welcome to our Nebraska Farm Bureau Forum. I'm Sherry Vinton and I'm here in Alliance tonight, but we're going to kick this forum off. This is an opportunity for members to hear from some of our candidates that are running for the United States representatives as congressmen for Nebraska's 1st Congressional District. Tonight, our candidates will have around 20 to 25 minutes to provide some opening comments. And after that, another 10 to 15 minutes for questions from members on the call. Tonight's event is a forum and not a debate. Nebraska farm and ranch families have a lot at stake with what happens in Washington. And whoever serves as our congressman for the 1st Congressional District will have a large to-do list. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions for them. If you have a question you'd like to ask during the question and answer session, please click to raise your hand and we'll call on you. You'll need to have an operating microphone on your computer, or you can type in your questions anytime into chat. If you're having any technical problems, we'll do our best to address them. The order for speaking tonight has changed a little bit as Senator Patty Pansing Brooks, who had originally planned on participating, has had a scheduling conflict arise. Therefore, Congressman Fortenberry, who has served the district since 2004, will speak first, followed by retired Lieutenant John Glenn Weaver, concluding with former Speaker and again member of the Nebraska Legislature, Mike Flood. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And Congressman Fortenberry, the floor is yours. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, look, thank you all. I apologize for the indecorous background here. Due to some flight schedules, just momentarily got a few moments ago, got in the Omaha airport and then driving, had to pull off the road. I thought it might be a good idea to stop at Mandam Park here on the edge of between Omaha and Bellevue, but the reception might be a little bit difficult. So please bear with me. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I had a nice visit this week in Washington with Jordan Ducks and Mark McCarg and Rob Robertson of the Farm Bureau. Appreciate all of your good work, particularly the interaction that we have on a very consistent basis with the team there regarding issues affecting agricultural policy. Really the strength of America's economy and frankly, something we don't quantify, the strength of America's values system flows forth from our land and our stewardship of that land, our ability to feed ourselves and feed the world. We enjoy the lowest grocery prices in the world, the most diverse array of foods. And this allows us to, in an uncommon way, leverage diplomatic strength overseas, providing humanitarian assistance, creating the conditions for stability by creating food security for others. That prevents migration, that creates the possibility of healthy nationalism, which prevents conflict. So agriculture is obviously clearly related to our economic well-being, our health and physical well-being, but also the strength of America's efforts overseas to create the conditions in which we are safe. Are we back now?
Yes, you are, Congressman. I think you're good now.
Okay, good. It's been a tremendous privilege for me to take a decided focus on agricultural policy as a member of the United States House of Representatives, particularly because of where I'm from and the ability to represent your interest, our interest as a people, as a state, but also for these deeper propositions of food security, health security, and national security. I have served as what's called the ranking member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture. Prior to joining Appropriations, I was on the House Ag Committee. And it was a fun story where the chairperson, she pulled me aside. She says, "Why do I associate you with agriculture?" I said, "Because I come from one of the largest agriculture districts in the country. I probably was the only student ever at Georgetown University in graduate school in public policy to study agriculture policy. And finally, I wanted to be a farmer when I was growing up. She said, "You're going to be in charge." So that's how that worked out. And it's been you can make policy, but you can also write the checks for that policy. And so I think it's a very important position to have been in to affect very good change and assistance for Nebraska, but overall America's food security policies. Let me highlight a couple of those that we frankly just finished. I'm proud to say that we've launched a very new initiative in partnership with the University of Nebraska. And through the Agricultural Research Service, there's going to be a new facility, and it has a long title focused on precision and regenerative agriculture, but I simply call it Farm of the Future. And so now that the appropriations bills are finished in the House, the budget's basically finished, $20 million more are going to flow to that facility at the University of Nebraska, in which we're going to wed high tech and high touch, using the latest innovation in precision agriculture and technology to drive down costs, to drive down inputs, to enhance profitability for farmers, and further environmental security. At the same time, we're also hopeful that this expands the agricultural family. So many more young people particularly are interested in specialty agriculture, specialty forms of crops, as well as the linkages that are now occurring between local production and food sources directly to the family, farm to table, and a novel program called the Farm to School program. I'll return to that in a moment. But this is a very exciting development because it leverages all of the best technology that's currently existing at the University of Nebraska, and it decidedly marks the university as really the 21st century for how we are going to, the 21st century research facility as to how we're going to advance technology and precision agriculture with enhanced profitability and better environmental outcomes, as well as all of the other benefits that can flow through value-added options to expand the ag family. This has been a decided goal of mine this particular year. We got it off the ground last year, but to enhance that funding and get it much further along the way is a great, great accomplishment. In addition to that, I've taken a strong interest in what I call the Farm to School program, developing that program, and it's very significantly catching on throughout the country, again, to try to create that linkage between the farm and the family, particularly through the school system, enhancing healthy food choice, educational options for kids to know where their food is coming from, and again, establishing regional economic linkages. This is very, very important. Something affecting the cattle industry as we went through the pandemic, we had quite a number of scares, obviously, but something you didn't hear very much about was the possibility of food supply disruptions. It rose up in about a week's time, and there were a number of concerns raised nationally as the meatpacking industry, some shut down due to COVID. Livestock was backing up. Transportation logistics were backing up. You had some national news reports of food being wasted, and people don't like to see that. Working very aggressively with my Democrat colleague, the chairman of the committee, and Secretary of Agriculture, Perdue at the time, we were able to quickly work with the department to untangle the knots in the transportation system, move potentially wasted food into baskets or boxes, if you will, for the poor and those in need, or those who had lost jobs through food banks. And so this was a successful initiative using the entirety of the commitment of the agricultural system to work through the pandemic so that no food was wasted, the logistical knot was untied, and our food supply kept flowing uninterrupted. We also worked directly with one of the meat packers here and the local health department to basically straighten out, along with the university, straighten out COVID procedures so that they could get back online as quickly as possible. And that was a very good success story of partnering with our capacities here in Nebraska through our own healthcare system and keeping the food supply running. We did a number of other things in appropriations this year as well. There's some funding for what's called Farm to the Future. That should be hopefully another helpful subsidy to the university as we kick off the other funding sources that will be needed to advance the research possibilities of the new Farm to the Future Center, Agricultural Research Service Center. There's an entire list of a number of things that we've done, but all told, about 75 million is coming to the University of Nebraska for a build out of the surge hospital. During the pandemic, you might remember that coronavirus patients first came to University of Nebraska. We have built out through the years in partnership with them, federal partnership with them, biocontainment facilities. That's why those first patients came here. However, building upon that idea, America is in grave need of what we call a surge hospital in case there's a massive emergency, particularly for our military. So given the proximity of the University of Nebraska Med Center to Strategic Command and Offutt Air Force Base, working with our military and the leaders in the university system, we've again subsidized their initiative to launch this surge hospital initiative, which is another critical infrastructural development and understanding of how to do health in America to protect against pandemics. And again, we were able to successfully leverage the expertise at the university to help one particular meat packer with best practices. But in the case of another surge like this, we'll be very, very well positioned to help lead the nation to take care of it, or in the event of a military emergency. In addition to that, this district contains Strategic Command. We are dealing with so many unthinkable possibilities given Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But the men and women who work here just a few miles down the road from where I'm at are professionals. They're always on high alert. They're there to keep us safe, to deter what could be the unthinkable, a nuclear exchange. But part of modernizing them is, or helping them modernize, is advancing communications and early detection procedures, command, control, and communications, it's called. So again, in this particular budget, we advanced some new initiatives in that regard to help further Nebraska's strengths, which really is food security, health care security, and national security. These are the three major plays that keep Nebraska strong and good. So with that said, again, I'm really privileged to have played a decided role in shaping America's agricultural policy. When I was in graduate school, I was an intern at the USDA in the old Farmers Home Administration. As a young person, I so eagerly and fullness of heart immersed myself into 4-H opportunities. I became the national poultry judging champion, which was a great kind of final summation of 4-H life for me. My grandfather had been a county agent. My mother had been a 4-H extension agent. And so I grew up in the family, so to speak. And agriculture has always been close to my heart. And again, to be privileged to be in this position to affect agricultural policy for our nation is so essential, not only for Nebraska, but for America's entire well-being, as well as the world. Something interesting is happening, and I'll conclude on this. The university officials tell me that ag programs are very vibrant and growing. And it's beyond our traditional programs of agronomy and animal science and animal husbandry and plant science. It includes a diverse array of sciences, as well as concepts like international development. As the world has gotten smaller and more interconnected, young people are particularly interested in how we attack the structures of poverty around the world, how we create the conditions for children to be safe, for there to be actually a mitigation of the need for migration around the world, to create healthy forms of nationalism. The military tells me, send us in last. Do everything that you can to create the conditions for stability and well-being of other peoples. And in that way, we can, again, promote the ideals of human dignity and therefore a healthy nationalism. It starts with food. When there is food insecurity, none of this works. You have about 3 days before civilization itself collapses. So young people are particularly interested as well in this space of international development, which starts with sustainable agricultural practices around the world. So I think that, again, you'll see this as a new part of agricultural culture coming to the fore and creating exciting new opportunities that are built upon our traditional sciences, but also embrace new ways of thinking as to how to leverage agriculture for our planet's well-being. With that said, Sherry or Jordan, whoever's coordinating, Jordan, I was able to hear you.
Yeah.
I assume somebody spoke in. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yep, it's me, Congressman. Yep, Sherry is actually doing double duty tonight at an event in Western Nebraska, and so I'm going to try to moderate questions a little bit, and we'll
All right.
go from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Congressman.
You
really appreciate that.
Can you see me? I apologize because of the logistics problem, and sun's going down.
You're good. You're good. We can still see you, so you're good. Not a problem at all. All right. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, type it in the chat. We'll go ahead and take those questions. So, Congressman, one of the first ones, as we wait for a couple to come in, I know we talked about this a little bit this week, but certainly the cost of inputs is of top of mind for producers, whether it be fertilizer or fuel or everything else in between. It seems that the cost of everything is going up. Talk a little bit about, I know you talked a little bit about some of these already, but talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're seeing with inflation, about the price of fuel. Hit a little bit on that if you wouldn't mind. Congressman, are you there?
Jordan, can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I think your question was basically the cost of inputs,
yes, sir.
shock to the system because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, what that's doing to both gas and fertilizer prices.
Yes, sir.
Look, there's no way around it. It's a harsh moment, and there's only one answer for the medium term, and it's amazing.
Oh, Congressman, we lost you again. I'm sorry.
It was saying it's a made in America energy independent strategy. It's not going to solve our problem overnight. But, about a little over a year ago, we were energy independent. Remember, we worked very hard for a very long time to expand the portfolio of options to power our nation, including renewable fuels. And then we opened up our own sources for exploration and became quickly energy independent. This is a way to control our own input costs and gas prices. And it's also a way to give us diplomatic leverage over countries like Russia, who have violated all forms of international norms and have assaulted the very principle of human dignity and national sovereignty. With that said, again, that can't be done overnight, but it's very unfortunate that the Biden administration chose basically to cut off lands from exploration, to stop the pipelines, and we're paying a very high price and there's a very high consequence right now. We need to go back to those things. I am all for transitioning to a more sustainable energy future. However, we have to do so from a position of strength. And when we give up diplomatic leverage, military leverage, and we're forced to pay a price back home, that's not only unfair to Americans, but the burden of what an unpredictable person like Putin has done comes upon us all the more harshly. So I was for stopping Russian oil imports. That's going to pinch things a little bit more. I think we had to do that. I think it's the right thing to do. I actually sent out a survey, 60% of Nebraskans agreed, because with the idea that it's going to pinch gas prices a little bit more, but it was an important thing to do. But nonetheless, let's get back to work and creating a made in America energy strategy.
Appreciate that, Congressman. We had a question typed in here. USDA reports that Nebraska lost 700 farms in 2020. What can we do, and what are some ideas that you have that we can do to stop the loss of farms in Nebraska, or the loss of the family farm in Nebraska?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the family farming model has been highly successful for us as a state, obviously economically, but in terms of this deeper proposition of values, the values of hard work, and particularly found in rural communities, neighbor helping neighbor. pulling together, utilizing our natural resources in an environmentally sound way. And so we don't want more and more concentration. We want back, back, Jordan.
Yep, you're back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yep.
We want a diverse array of producers. We want a competitive environment. We want young people to be able to enter into agriculture. We want successful intergenerational farms that carry, obviously, the wisdom and the tradition and economic well-being, particularly for rural communities. One thing we have done at the national level is focus on young and beginning farmers and ranchers. There's a lot of finance incentives that have been built into the farm bills and the appropriations bills to help on the finance side of that. In fact, I held a conference on that last fall. But I think that what I said earlier is also a part of expanding the agricultural family. Obviously, keeping production agricultural viable, ensuring that we have reasonable costs for inputs, appropriate markets for the product, but also advanced research that helps us lower cost, as well as improve yield for higher profitability and expand into value-added propositions that we haven't fully taken advantage of. This will actually expand the agricultural family. It might not be in the traditional 1 to 2 to 3,000 acre grain farm, but there are a lot of value adds that we can use to attract young people to the sector. In addition,
Congressman, unfortunately, we lost you one more time.
sorry, Jordan, I believe.
Nope, you're good. There you go. Go right ahead.
Yeah, and I think one more point. I have heard stories of older generation farmers who need to transition out, beginning to create interesting types of new dynamic partnerships with younger farmers to help them transition into the business successfully. And that's encouraging as well. But the young farmers and ranchers initiatives that we have both in the Farm Bill through appropriations has been helping on the finance. Jordan, I apologize for the
No, you're all right.
this.
Actually,
Okay.
it's going to lead me to my next question. Actually, one of my tech people, Congressman, recommended to turn your camera off, and that may keep the connection a little more stable. Just
Great. All right.
not a problem. It actually leads to my next question, Congressman. Obviously, we talk an awful lot about expanding rural broadband opportunities, and certainly this is probably a good example of that. The need for additional cell phone service and hardwired internet service across rural America. Obviously, there has been opportunities presented in recent legislation, even some in the omnibus bill that was taken up or worked through yet this week. Talk a little bit about the importance of broadband and the opportunities that exist for agriculture on that front.
Jordan, I'm glad you raised the question. I believe I'm back now.
Yes, sir.
Because this has also been a key priority when we think constructively about rural development. And obviously the pandemic created the opportunity for a digital leap. All the technology is here, but the utilization and implementation of that technology for advancing telework and telemedicine and teleeducation, as well as e-commerce and the small scale business options that can be tied to larger scale options that are farther away, giving people the chance to perhaps live in the rural areas with enhanced opportunity. Rural broadband was always a priority in these appropriations bills that we worked on. But again, it came to the fore during the pandemic when we obviously needed it to be interconnected.
Oh man. Sure, he'll be right back on.
I think we took a great digital leap, and then the additional funds that are flowing obviously to build out the entire system, but it's not just that, it's enhancing speeds and operability and last mile initiatives. You know, during the pandemic, I got an email from a woman from Columbus who was in the parking lot with her child, simply trying to connect to the Wi-Fi in the school so they could do homework together. And that's Columbus, around 25,000. It's a relatively larger rural community. And there are internet options there, but not everybody is capable of taking advantage of them. So the Rural Broadband Initiative, which has been an ongoing work, which is now going to be accelerated at the federal level, really does reshape the notion of rural development. By the way, the words rural development, those two words are about 100 years old now. And so a lot of times in Congress, what I like to do is try to update our thinking and language. And I call it the ecosystem of livability. And others, that really hasn't caught on yet. But if you think about it, creating an ecosystem of livability and operability of advanced internet technology, particularly for our rural communities, which creates ease of connectedness to medicine, to telework, educational opportunity, as well as e-commerce, is a huge boost. It's the next wave of rural development options.
Appreciate that
Jordan,
very much.
can you repeat that? Jordan, can you repeat those 3 words I said?
I actually I can't, Congressman, and I have an excuse tonight. My wife is who's a high school business teacher, is doing parent teacher conference, and I'm playing single dad while trying to do all things at once, and so I got distracted for a minute. I apologize for that.
Yeah. No,
say them
right.
one more time so we can get it in our nomenclature here.
Yeah, I'm trying to introduce a new concept called the ecosystem of livability.
There we go. We'll make it. That's perfect. We have time for folks on the line. Go right ahead. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat or raise your hand. We have time for for a couple more questions here, Congressman. We have one that was sent in here. Congressman, the value of ag exports for the state equals about 30% of our total of the state's ag receipts. What can we do? What can the Biden administration do? What can you do to help work on expanding some of those overseas markets for Nebraska agricultural products?
Jordan, one thing, I believe I'm back. Jordan, one thing that we've done of late is try to press the Biden White House to get China to fulfill its commitments that the Trump administration had negotiated regarding the sale of our agricultural exports. So look, exports are an essential part of this. Obviously, it benefits us tremendously. The gift of America really is our natural resources and the base that we have, plus the technology we've used through the land grant system, plus the value of stewardship of our farmers and ranchers that not only have, again, fed when we want to talk about a made in America strategy, it's ag products that are made in America. Our trade deficit would be so much more worse, much more worse, if it weren't for agricultural exports. This is a story that's not very well told, frankly, in Washington, nor throughout the country, just how essential American agricultural output is to our economic well-being, for our own food security, as well as the food security of the world. We leverage exports as well for diplomatic relations. Again, it's the main thing that we produce in our country that we export, and our trade imbalances would be so much worse. Again, we're pressing the president administration to have China fulfill its obligations that were negotiated under President Trump. This is something that we've just done of late.
Appreciate that.
And I do have a letter in that regard. I should probably send that to you all so that you have that. It was signed by, this was just a recent initiative, so we can get that.
Very good. Sounds great. Thank you, sir. We've got time for just one or two more questions if folks have them. One question, Congressman, that pops up a lot is obviously we are beginning conversations on the next farm bill. Obviously, a lot of farmers talk about Title I and crop insurance, but I'm going to talk about something just a little different here. The Build Back Better initiative has been a part of a lot of conversations there on climate and climate dollars that Build Back Better had in it. And there's a lot of talk that maybe there'll be an attempt to try to bring those dollars back into a Title II Farm Bill conversation and what programs that exist in the conservation side of things. So talk a little bit about maybe the next farm bill or maybe some of the climate initiatives that are out there that Congress is looking to do from a producer standpoint, maybe blend in with conservation there.
Jordan, it just got too choppy. I missed the core of your question, but what I think you were talking about is conservation initiatives that are under consideration as the next farm bill looms.
Yes, sir.
The issue of climate change and how agriculture positions itself to be at the table during these discussions. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, this is a very great question because look, farmers are the first stewards of the land. We're the first environmentalists, if you will. And so this has come up. I had a little spat with Bill Gates. I don't know if you saw that because he's been trying to promote what I call fake meat, lab meat, chemically produced meat. And one of the reasons is because emissions are said to be a producer of a significant impact on climate change, methane, basically. Well, actually, our production capacity is so high and so good, given the amount of meat we produce, we are way down the chart in terms of impact from methane emissions into the atmosphere versus other countries like India. And so when you have advanced technology and you have the value of stewardship, as we do in agriculture, we are capable of leading through innovation and through this values proposition, sort of the next dynamic as to how we all think constructively without disruption, but in a smooth transition to a more sustainable future. There will be a lot of funds. In fact, there's something called the Conservative Climate Caucus now, and I've joined it so that we can all be at the table thinking through how we use technology and innovation to ensure environmental goals without economic disruption. This will be an important part of the next farm bill. Obviously, my side of the aisle is not in charge right now, but the other side has aggressively funded a number of initiatives in this regard. There is also the ability to think constructively in terms of soil health, how that is a carbon capture environment, which again can lead to economic options for farmers in terms of carbon credits and such. So there can be exciting things here that are done. And so we don't need to be on the outside of that conversation. We need to be at the table to make sure that our perspective is very well represented, but that we, through, again, innovative policy and actually technological innovations, we can bring about important environmental changes that are not disruptive, but that actually yield results for farmers.
Perfect. All right, Congressman, we really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you this evening. Thank you, as always, for what you do. And as always, feel free to reach out if you ever need anything from us.
Well, I apologize for the technological disruption. I think the timing was, I should have been in a place with Wi-Fi. And so thanks for your patience. I'm sorry. I tried to get on top of a hill here overlooking the Missouri thinking it would work, but you've been kind to put up with the disruptions. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you,
Not a
Mark.
problem at all. Not a
All
problem
right,
at all.
take care.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. All right, goodbye. All right, thank you very much. Okay, our next candidate on is retired Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn Weaver. Glenn was on just 1 second ago, and then he jumped off because he was on a little early. We'll give him 1 second. I will shoot him a quick note to let him know that we are ready for him. And I'm sure he'll be on in just 1 second. Apologies for the delay. As always, again, we appreciate everyone jumping on. We apologize for, again, some of the, as always, it's been handy. There are things about doing these things on a virtual level that allows us to do it all at once. But at the same time, there's always technology issues that pop up. So appreciate your all's patience with us as we kind of jump through this, and we had some technical difficulties there, but I think we had certainly got the gist of the conversation for the most part. I just sent Lieutenant Colonel Weaver a text, and so he should be on here. There he is right there. All right, everyone. Glenn just introduced you just a second ago. Appreciate you jumping on. Sorry, we kind of bounced back and forth with you on timing here, but we have a group of Nebraska Farm Bureau members on. More than happy to listen with you, and we're ready for your opening comments if you are.
Okay, Jordan, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay,
It's
hey.
good to meet you face to face here.
Yeah, a lot of emails back and forth. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I really appreciate your time. So my name is Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn Weaver. I retired Air Force about a month ago, and then immediately entered into the race for the 1st Congressional District of Nebraska here. And so what I really want to talk about briefly is my background and sort of why I feel like I'm best qualified for the job. So like a lot of the farmers out there, I grew up on a family farm in West Central Illinois, grain and livestock farm. Before I came in the Air Force, I raised pigs and cattle growing up, mostly pigs, because my labor was cheap back then. And so I just raised the pigs in the A-frame hog houses. Today I was up in West Point at the sale, brought back a lot of memories of taking my feeder pig to the sale. So grew up on a grain and livestock farm there, raked hay on an International M tractor, and got the skin cancer to prove that. Really a great way to grow up as a young kid and prepare me for military service. I was incidentally also homeschooled at the time from 6th grade until I went to college at the University of Wyoming. So I totally understand, totally support families that want to raise and teach their kids the best way they feel fit, whether that be private school, public school, or homeschooling. So grew up on the farm, lived on the farm until I went to college in the University of Wyoming, majored in ag, animal science. I was going to be a veterinarian. I decided to join ROTC, so I took all the ag classes, really enjoyed that. Part of the rodeo team, livestock judging, soil judging, that type of stuff. Entered in ROTC for 4 years, and then out of that, also studied Russian. So I speak Russian. I lived in Russia. I've been to Russia. I've got a bachelor's in Russian as well. And so commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the Air Force, and then went to flight training in San Antonio. Went there for a year, and then came up to Offutt Air Force Base in 2000, and was stationed here for 9 years, the first time through combat missions, 11 deployments, combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. I was on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. Did that for 9 years, and the Air Force sent me to Norfolk, Virginia to work for the Joint Staff, and then I got a master's from Alabama, and then went to Oklahoma to also get a master's degree, and then I went to the Pentagon writing all the war plans. So I understand national security issues and how to deter and defeat aggression from various states, to include Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Then after that, in 2016, I came back to Offutt to serve another 6 years, and just recently retired at the end of January. And I was running the nuclear command and control facility there, upgrading our command post. I ran the command post there with several folks doing an important mission for the country. A flood took my command post out, and then I had to relocate and ask Congress for about $12 million to rebuild that. So served there, recently retired, got out of the military, and just want to continue serving my country and my community. I feel like the sort of the mission of the 1st Congressional District fits my expertise with ag. Grew up on a farm. I know the value of hard work. And then at Offutt Air Force Base, I served in the military for 22 years, combat veteran, 15 years at Offutt. So I feel I feel like I got a decent understanding of the mission and also served at Stratcom at U.S. Strategic Command for 2 years when I was here many years ago. So to summarize it up, I just want to continue my service to my country and my community and advocate for the people of the 1st Congressional District, focusing on my priorities, as I think I've laid out many times, are the economy. We got to get inflation under control. Part of that is just stopping government spending, stop the reallocation of government money going to people and things that it doesn't need to go to. Securing the border, national security, we need to build the wall. And then obviously ag policy support, international trade for our farmers to be able to export grain and livestock outside of the country. And I feel like my national security experience is going to be helpful in that, because I will deter conflict before we get to conflict, because having been deployed 11 times, many times in combat, I served at the beginning of Afghanistan to the end of the war, the beginning of Iraq war to the end. Going to conflict with other nations is not good for our economy, and it would really hurt our farmers. So I feel like my background in national security, maybe serving on the House Armed Services Committee, as well as the Ag Committee, will help me do that and help serve the people of Nebraska. A conflict with China right now in Taiwan would devastate our ag economy. And so I feel like with my expertise, having flown in the Pacific, having dealt with that problem set, I could, help deter any conflict there. So my goal is to serve 10 years in Congress, 10 years in the House, and then let somebody else do it. I don't want to be a career politician. I've never served a day of public office in my life. As a matter of fact, I've only been retired a month now. So this is the beginning of my political journey. Obviously, I agree with everything that you guys have in your farm policies, your national policies here. I'm not going to take a pay raise unless we get a balanced budget. I won't trade stocks as your congressman. I won't ask for health care for me or my family. And so I just want to serve the people for 10 years and then let somebody smarter and better looking than me come along in 10 years and carry the ball forward. We need to certainly limit federal regulations, tariffs. And so this is my full-time job. I'm campaigning full-time. I was traveling around the district ever since the day I got out of the Air Force. So this is my priority. I'm 100% committed, and I'll always have the backs of the people of the 1st Congressional District, and more importantly, the farmers. So I don't know if you wanted me to go any longer than that, Jordan, but sort of that's a nutshell in about 8 or 9 minutes of what I believe and why I'm doing this.
Appreciate that very much, Glenn. We've got some questions. We'll again open it up for questions if folks want to. We have those available in the chat function or the Q&A function that folks can type those in. We also, if you've got a microphone on, you can certainly use your questions, and we can hear from you there as well. So we'll give a chance to get folks moving forward there. I know, Glenn, one of the questions that is on the minds of a lot of producers across the country are really the cost of inputs, and the cost of inputs from fertilizer to fuel. It's really across the board, really a significant problem for producers. Talk a little bit about that issue, and talk a little bit about maybe some plans or ideas you have to address some of those issues.
Yeah, that's a great question. I heard a lot of that today. I was talking to a lot of farmers at the West Point sale barn, and the cost of bean meal has just gone through the roof, and the prices and the input costs. I mean, a lot of it, I think a lot of it is being caused by world instability. I know it's not directly related to Ukraine, but I think that the instability has got people a little bit concerned there. I know the Biden administration hasn't done everything that they can do to lift some of the tariffs to be able to export our products overseas. So there's a demand issue. We need to be selling more grain and livestock overseas, and just cutting I would certainly, as far as the fuel taxes, stop taxing fuel and diesel fuel and input costs. And the farmers are really concerned about this. I mean, I saw, bred cows selling today for lower than they probably should, because there's a lot of concern in the instability and the rising cost of input costs. And the fastest way to do that is is to really stop the government spending on the programs, because the more money the government is pumping into our economy, the higher the prices go. So I wouldn't have voted for the bill that just went through, and I don't think our delegation here in Nebraska either voted for the bill that just was turned down in Congress. But I would certainly stop government spending. Would be the first thing that I would probably do, and then open up more trade with China. But Ukraine has got people on edge for sure.
Appreciate that very much. We have a couple questions in. Glenn, one of the things that has been asked, USDA reports that Nebraska is losing farms, up to 700 farms in 2020. What can we do to stop the loss of family farms in our state?
Yeah, having been a family farmer myself, that's really sad. And I've been to a lot of the county meetings as well. And the one way we stop that is to encourage our ag and FFA teachers. I mean, one of the smaller things we can do is just encourage, we're seeing a lot of ag and FFA teachers leaving the classroom. And I remember when I was in ag and FFA growing up, so those teachers were like the fuel to keep the young kids engaged in farming. And they're leaving and they're retiring and nobody's replacing them. So I think, having some special focus on bringing the ag teachers back into the classroom, encouraging people to be farmers. A lot of farmers I talked today, increase in property taxes has caused, 170% increase in property taxes over the last 10 years. They're paying property taxes on land that's not keeping up with the input costs. But we need to have a focus on youth going back into agriculture. I think scholarships to study at the university, to study ag, and then special loans for family or for small farmers to start up their business, because getting started in ag today is not a cheap venture. But I would support programs that get youth into agriculture, whether that be subsidy loans to start a farm and business, and to keep the young kids and interested in farming.
All right, appreciate that. I have another question here. Glenn, obviously as new to politics and probably a candidate that not a lot of folks know a lot about. Talk about your plan to get elected. Talk about as a new guy to this whole business here. Talk about your plan to try to get elected to serve in the House of Representatives, and how to maybe overcome some obstacles that exist for new candidates like yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I guess the only thing I really have right now is my two legs and a little bit of funding I'm getting from folks, which is everybody has really liked my message. I'm in this for the right reasons. I'm a hard worker, and I'm up, it's 5:30, I'm out the door talking to people at, county courthouses, to restaurants, to diners, to you guys here, to sale barns. And so my strategy is just building a base of folks to help me. We're getting there. I'm interviewing a lot of folks. I've had a lot of support. We have a complex race going on right now. And so, 22 years in the Air Force, I'm keeping this focused on the issues. So as I go around Nebraska, I am focused 100% on the issues: inflation, growing future farmers, growing the family farm, keeping us safe, increase in national security, building the wall. I think we really need to build a wall, and just continuing my message. In the Air Force, we learn leadership by walking around. So all I can do is have a presence. I've been on several radio shows and just getting my name out there, but my message is resonating with the voters of Nebraska. They don't want career politicians. 2 decades in politics is too long. Career politicians, they want people coming in young with fresh eyes, and my energy and I say my youth, I'm 45 years old, but my hope is to motivate other people to serve in politics and build up the next generation. So in 10 years, people will come behind me. I'm a big mentor. I love to mentor people in the Air Force. We're always looking for our next mission. This is my next mission. And my strategy is just get out and see voters. You know, everybody can say I need X amount of money for commercials, I need this, but what I really have is my 2 feet and be able to drive around and meet potential voters, knock on doors, make calls, meet people at different venues and restaurants, and driving up to, I mean, I don't want to say every single city, but most cities in the 1st Congressional District. I'm a pilot, so I've flown to all the airports and stopped at the flight business office, or the business offices there, talked to people. So pretty much I'll just talk to anybody that wants to listen, but I'm 100% focused on the issues here.
Appreciate that very much. Another question I know that gets a lot, that we get a lot. And again, if folks have more questions, they can certainly type them into the chat or raise your hand. I know one of the issues that is out there a lot is expansion of broadband capacity in rural Nebraska. In the infrastructure bill that was passed last year, and also in even just the spending bill that was passed, I believe today, there's been a lot of investment in rural broadband, but I think still a disconnect with producers or folks who live in rural areas of how to get it. Talk a little bit about that, and a little bit about maybe your plan to expand broadband access in rural Nebraska.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember growing up as a kid having just the rabbit ears, you know, not having any TV, living out on the farm. I can't imagine now not being connected to the internet and the global economy that we are in, to be able to buy futures and set your grain prices. I think a lot of it is just an education piece, and making sure that people know about it, and just driving around, and you know, the companies that we have installing the rural broadband, knocking on doors, making phone calls and saying, hey, you know, you've got access to internet. Let's hook you up to the internet. It's been, you know, the infrastructure has been put in there. Here's how the internet can sort of help you with your business. I'm sure a lot of people are hooked up to it, but it's just educating people about what options there are and the availability that it's there. One of the veteran support offices, I think it was in Colfax County, had sort of a seminar for all the veterans to talk about the VA and the benefits that the veterans can receive from the VA that they're not even aware of. And so, you know, I would do something similar to that, is have the local communities come together, you know, meet once a month about rural broadband, and sort of an education piece where the companies can come in, and the elected leaders can come in and explain to folks rural broadband, how to get connected, how to plug into it. But it's going to be a constant message, a strategic message. You know, a lot of times in the Air Force, I learned as a leader, you've got to mention things over and over, because everybody's busy, moving different directions. I would certainly hold town halls in a lot of the major cities and the small cities, mostly the small cities and rural areas, to educate people about rural broadband and how to get plugged into it. So that would be my strategy for getting the word out.
Appreciate that very much. Again, if folks have a question, go ahead and type it in. We have one here, Glenn. Actually, I'm going to combine a couple questions here. The value of ag exports to the state equals about roughly 30%. Roughly 30% of the state's ag receipts. And there's a lot of questions about both the importance of that, and also maybe on the import side, the amount of product that we also import from other countries, and maybe some concern there that we're exporting a lot and it's important, but at the same time, we're importing some product and we have some competition there. And is that driving down maybe the price of commodities, specifically maybe beef for that? Talk a little bit about your position on trade, and a little bit deeper, and talk a little bit about what you would do on that front.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I think with the tariffs, I don't think the Biden administration has done all they can do to reduce the tariffs for these 30% of the goods going out of the country. We need to work and create a national security policy and an ag policy together to create peace and harmony all over the world, so that our products will get exported. Conflict in Eastern Europe doesn't help with that. That conflict, with the right expertise and a person with a military background and 20 years of wartime experience, I think could have alleviated that, which then would have, you know, allowed more crops and farm and ag products to flow out of the state. I think keeping our message with the State Department about building alliances with our friends and partners in foreign countries to be able to sell our products. But then also, if we import products, we need to make sure, like say for China, if we have to import products from China, that they are held accountable to the rules, because if they can make a product cheaper but aren't accounting to the normal rules of production, then they need to be held accountable for that, because they'll be competing with the farmers in the industry in the United States that can make those products. So certainly always support ag export. I'll be a champion for ag. I'll be a champion for beef and the products that Nebraska sells all over the world. And I think there's a lot of markets, certainly in Africa, that we can explore, certainly in the Middle East that we can explore. The time that I spent in the Middle East, there's no way you could get a steak in Qatar. I've been in Qatar. I was in Kuwait, Dubai. They don't have steak over there. And I think, they certainly have the wherewithal and the means, all this oil now that they're selling for 130. So I would open up and explore markets. I would go over there myself, personally meet. If I'm on the ag committee, if I'm fortunate enough, I would go over there personally. I mean, I've been over there 10 times already. I mean, I'd love to go over and support agriculture. So I would meet with the leaders of the Middle Eastern countries and African countries and explain to them the opportunities that they can have to import beef, but most importantly, Nebraskan beef, because you'll never get a steak anywhere around the world as good as you can right here in Nebraska. And I think people outside of Nebraska don't realize what they're missing. And I would just educate people and build relationships and partnerships to open up trade.
Appreciate that. I think we've got time for a couple questions here yet. One of them I know that is talked about a lot in ag circles just because of the newness of it and what's happening. We are talking about the potential of another, we're going to be talking about farm bills again, and the possibility of having another farm bill here and the debate starting that this year into next year. As a part of that, climate discussions are seeming to pop up more and more, especially in regards to some of the conservation programs that farmers and ranchers use, and maybe tying some things on the climate end. Talk a little bit about that area, maybe a little bit about Farm Bill and a little bit about, I know some of the push that exists within private sector on for climate initiatives that they're asking farmers to do, and then also maybe some federal policy coming down the pike when it comes to climate policy and potential marketplaces and regulations and all that type of thing. That's an easy, quick question, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So go right ahead.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, absolutely. Our farmers do more than anybody to conserve our planet. I've got CRP land myself, and farmers do more than anybody else, I think, in the United States to conserve our planet. They're conservative in their no-till drilling, and they're planting their CRP land to stop erosion. And what I will do is protect farmers so that if they have land in CRP, they're credited for that. And so they're not polluting, obviously they're not polluting the earth by that, but, CRP is important. Our ag policies are important. The Farm Bill is important, but I'll protect our farmers so that the climate folks are not leveraging excess taxes or anything else on farmers for things that they're doing, because what our farmers need is protection from the federal government and regulations. We don't need to make things harder for our farmers. We need to make things easier. And as I, am part of the Farm Bill process, protecting farmers is going to be key. Now, if somebody wants to put land in CRP land, they should be compensated for that. I think I'm not going to allow anybody to call that a subsidy, because they're setting land aside. And they should, that if that land is taken out of production, they should be compensated by it. So if the federal government wants to put so many acres in set aside and it works well with farmers, that's something they should be compensated with. So as we move forward with the Farm Bill, I will certainly admit when I don't know something. And the great thing about what I want to do with the Nebraska Farm Bureau is build a relationship so that if I don't know what to say, I don't know because I'm not an active farmer. I love farming. I've got a farm background, but the day-to-day farming aspects and the policy, I'm going to really lean on the Nebraska farmers. I plan to stay connected to the farmers. So when I'm writing the farm bill, I'm going to go to a farmer and say, what say you on this? I'm going to go to the Nebraska Farm Bureau and be intimately involved. I'm not going to go into a room by myself and write this thing, because I'm doing this to serve the farmers in the 1st Congressional District. So this will be a conversation as we go forward, building the new farm bill and listening to your priorities about what needs to go into that farm bill. But I'll be protecting farmers. Climate's a big thing. I mean, you know, we need to have insurance policies, because if the climate, you don't get any rain in the pollination of the corn in the late summer, yields are going to be reduced. And so all this needs to come together, and the insurance policies that the farmers, I think, need to be able to take part of, and the federal government help them with that, is certainly would be a priority of mine.
Appreciate that very much. I think we've got time for one more question here. Nebraska currently has record low unemployment, which I know everyone likes to tout, but at the same time, we also have a significant workforce shortage in both rural and urban areas. Talk a little bit about what can be done to maybe work through that challenge, the need for a workforce.
Yeah, I wish if I had I think every sheriff department I've talked to in the 1st Congressional District is short on people and being able to hire people. I mean, unemployment might as well be at 0. But what we have to do is so the Nebraska tax, the way we tax our people is the highest. South Dakota has no tax. I went to school in Wyoming; they have no tax. So the state legislature needs to get into lowering, and I know Governor Ricketts is doing great work to try to lower this, but we have to lower, our income tax for our state, because we are the highest in the central region. So if somebody wants to work, they're not going to stay in Nebraska when the taxes are nothing, if they can drive 100 miles to the north. So first of all, starting and lowering our state income tax, property taxes have to get under control. I mean, people, they're rising at an astronomical rate. And I know the governor and the legislature is working very hard to lower that, but certainly property taxes is going to keep people here, lower income taxes. And as far as the federal government goes, I am for a balanced budget amendment. We are spending way too much money. That's why we're in this inflation problem, is the government is spending money on top of money that we just don't have. And I don't understand. And when I'm there, I will not support any spending with money that we don't have. I'm for a balanced budget amendment and to tax our citizens as little as possible. But Nebraska is the good life. I've lived all over the world, and there's no better place to live than Nebraska. You've got great quality of life, great people, wide open spaces, easy access, no traffic. And so other than the property taxes and the income tax. So I think if we get after the lowering the taxes, we'll find a lot more people deciding to stay here in Nebraska.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate that immensely, and appreciate the time, your time this evening. Again, is there I actually failed to ask this with our previous guest, but is there some social media website that folks can go to for your campaign?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter, Real John Glenn. So that's REAL John JOHN Glenn. And then my website is John Glenn 4 Nebraska. I try to keep those updated, mostly Twitter, to let you know what I'm doing, let you know what my priorities are. I push out a schedule of where I'm going to be during the week, so you can either meet me or avoid me. But yeah, it's fun. I'm traveling the district. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm going to use you and your farmers as a resource to learn from them, and I will always stay connected to the farmers in the 1st Congressional District in Nebraska, and I will work hand in glove with the Congressman Smith and Bacon to work together in our policy to make continue the great ag products that come out of the state of Nebraska.
All right, perfect. Well, Glenn, we appreciate you very much your time tonight, and good luck as the campaign progresses.
Okay, thank you. Great
All right,
questions.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna wait for Speaker Flood to jump on. I just am texting their folks, so they're going to jump on here in 1 second. And there he is. It's like magic. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, certainly, Senator Flood, and certainly appreciate your time this evening. We have heard a lot of questions, and we've got a lot of questions that we'll ask you as well. But again, as a reminder for our folks on, please don't hesitate when Senator Flood is done to type those questions in, or to raise your hand if you have a microphone to ask them directly. We'll continue to try to ask them as best as we can, but we'll turn it over to you, Senator Flood, and appreciate you joining us this evening, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I am coming to you live from Columbus, Nebraska. I just finished an event here with about 150 people. To those that I haven't met yet, my name is Mike Flood. I'm from Norfolk, Nebraska. I'm born and raised there. I got involved in radio at a young age, 15, and continued that through college and law school, and came back to my hometown of Norfolk in 2000, and actually 22 years ago today, started my first station, US 92 Radio, which serves the rural areas of Northeast Nebraska. And today I have 15 radio stations and 7 TV stations doing business as News Channel Nebraska. And I'm very proud of the business I've been able to build. And I have operations in Sydney and Nebraska City and Omaha and Beatrice and all over the great state, and very fortunate to be a part of that industry. In 2005, I ran for the Nebraska legislature representing Madison County in the state legislature. I've earned the endorsement of Farm Bureau in all 3 of my state legislature elections. I served for 8 years, beginning in 2005. I became the speaker in 2007 at the age of 31 and served in that role until 2012, making me the state's longest serving speaker. I'm now back in the legislature serving Madison and Southern Pierce County. And while serving in the legislature, I was able, as speaker, I was able to work with Governor Heineman to deliver, and the Farm Bureau to deliver the state's largest tax package, relief package at the time in state history. Also worked very hard on the Keystone XL pipeline to get it rerouted before it was eventually declined by President Joe Biden. I also worked very hard to keep the death penalty in Nebraska and change the method of lethal injection for purposes of executing those that are on death row. And more than anything, in my service to the legislature, I've really prided myself as someone that brings people together and gets things done. I'm interested in serving on the federal level because I want to get things done. I want to be a voice that will serve the people of the 1st Congressional District, from Lincoln to Cass County, Sarpy, all the way up to Norfolk, obviously Columbus, Seward, Brainerd, all the communities in the 1st Congressional District down to Seward. And I really do think that America's at a crossroads. And the number one question we have this election cycle, as we look at our federal delegation, we must ensure that we fire Nancy Pelosi and that we install a Republican speaker and take control of the House. And I really do believe that we are at a crossroads. And I also believe that the path to changing the leadership of the House and firing Nancy Pelosi and putting a check on Joe Biden's power runs through the 1st Congressional District. Our congressman is facing the fight of his political life in a courtroom in California as he is set to go to trial next week on 3 federal felonies. We cannot take any chances in the 1st Congressional District. And I announced on January 16th that I was putting my name in the hat to be the nominee for the Republican Party. And that's the nomination that I'm seeking. But I have found out something since I started running. I have gotten support from hundreds, thousands of people across the 1st Congressional District They want to talk and interact with their congressman. They want to be heard. They want to talk about the issues that are affecting them, not just in agriculture, but in financial services. People are worried about the future our country is going. Inflation's at 7%. Grocery stores and gas pumps tell the story when you look at your receipt. People have reached out to me, and very few people, after I've had the chance to talk to them and raise money, and I've been very successful of raising money in the 1st Congressional District, they are excited about the prospect of new energy and new leadership in Washington. I am somebody that loves the legislative branch. I've been in the legislature now for 10 years total in Nebraska. And one of the best things that happened to me in my public service life is that in 2012, I was finishing my 8 years of service as the speaker. I was running for governor. The night that I announced that I was running for governor, my wife found a lump in her breast, and it turned out to be a very aggressive form of breast cancer. And I'm pleased to say that she's healthy as could be. She joined me in Columbus tonight. She's heading to Nashville with her sister-in-law from North Platte, and they're going to celebrate my niece Morgan's 21st birthday as a family in Nashville. And I say that because she's super healthy. But the best thing that came out of that, not only was the time that I was able to be with my family and my boys, but I went back to work. I was in a high elected office in Nebraska, and I went back to work, and I went back to building a business, to signing bank notes, to taking risks, to paying off bank loans and hiring people. And I was able to grow my business in 2012 from about 30 people to 120 full-time people today, close to 200 by the time you count up all the part-time. And I guess the reason I share that with you is that the men and women of agriculture understand risks. People in agriculture understand what it means to make a payroll or to pay for the property taxes and meet the deadlines and deal in a business that has uncertain outcomes. And, you know, I've had the pleasure since I left the legislature of serving on a local ag bank board. And I've learned every month about the risks that ag producers take, the uncertainty that they face. And I've watched as different ag producers work through the difficult prices that we saw, you know, in the last 7 years, 8 years, and how that impacted agricultural operations. And so, you know, I can give you a big, long speech about every single issue, but what I want to emphasize tonight, and I'm really looking forward to the questions, is that I have the energy and the experience and the drive to be the best congressman we could have in the 1st Congressional District, somebody that wants to be not only a brand ambassador for Nebraska products, somebody that lives in a community that anytime I go anywhere, I have to drive the entirety of the 1st Congressional District. Whether I land at Omaha's Eppley Airfield and come up through Dodge and Cummings, Stanton and Madison County, or I go to Lincoln and I proceed through Platte, Colfax, Butler, Seward, Lancaster County, or I go over to Cass County or Sarpy County, I feel like I have a real picture of what the 1st Congressional District is. I live in a rural community that is directly tied to agriculture. My business succeeds if farmers are succeeding. So I think I really want to make the point that that connection is a benefit to me. It keeps me very grounded, and it means that if I'm the congressman serving the 1st Congressional District and you make your way to Washington, we're going to sit down and talk about things. I've run for 3 times as the state senator for Madison County. I've never had an opponent to speak of. And that's because I take care of my constituents. And it didn't matter if I was the speaker of the legislature or a freshman senator. If somebody from my legislative district needed help, whether it was something that dealing with an agency or passing a bill, they got top-notch service. They get top-notch service. And I learned that by starting a business, by running a business, and I've used that same experience as a small town attorney in the legislature, and I'll take that same advocacy to Washington. So that's kind of just an opening introduction to me, and I look forward to having a discussion about all the issues that are important to the Farm Bureau membership.
Perfect. Appreciate that very much, Senator Flood. We have, again, if folks have questions, feel free to throw it in the Q&A section or in the chat. I think we'll start with this one that we've had a couple times already. Senator, USDA reports that Nebraska has lost something like around 700 farms in 2020. What can we do? What can Congress do to stop the loss of family farms and ranches in the state of Nebraska?
Well, there's a lot of different factors at work. I think when you talk about losing the number of farms, I'm going to just stop for a second and talk about dairy. I've been talking to Chris Bousquet a lot with the Nebraska Dairy Association, and he and I have talked with other constituents of mine. And Northeast Nebraska, as you may know, has the state's largest concentration of dairies, and I'm talking, Platte River North, and obviously there's a lot in Cedar and Knox counties. And it used to be that we had literally 4,000 dairies in Nebraska, and today, when you look at the number of dairies, I think technically it may be 110, but the real number Chris was telling me is about 90. And when you look at what has happened since 1980 to 2022, there's a lot of factors at play. One of those factors is that the technology has improved, the need to increase the profit margin with the costs that go in. You have to introduce more automation. Nucor Steel had 800 people working there in 1979, and today there's about 380 making the steel, and that's because machines are moving it through. One of the things I want to stress is I see agriculture as a business, and when you are making money, you're using the technology available to be able to run that business. And so I think one of the reasons we talk about the number of farmers is, let's be honest, technology's out there, and it's going to continue to improve and do more on the farm. I've talked to farmers in Madison County that said the tractor is going to drive itself. We have to embrace technology. We have to understand that it's coming, and that if we want to remain profitable, we have to make sure that we're using that in precision agriculture. Now, to the question about farmers, it cost me in 2000 about $450,000 to start a radio station. You can't even buy a piece of equipment for a farm when you look at that kind of an entry number. In the legislature, I have supported, and we are working to make it easier and more effective to use the beginning farmer tax credits. I think what ag producers need is they need access to capital. We have to have a plan to pay it back. We have to use the same tools that we use in the SBA program to let people get into a farm, but we have to figure out a way to plan for somebody's 20-year entrance into farming and make it work through the federal programs. So, I think it's a mix. We have to understand we need technology. We have to have access to capital so that young people that want to get into farming can do it. The other thing I'll say, and I was impressed, last night I was at the Polk County Farm Bureau meeting, and I met two young folks in agriculture, and I want to say, in their late 20s, early 30s, that were participating in Farm Bureau-led leadership programs. And I can't think of another industry in Nebraska that has done as good of a job training up the next generation of leaders. And I think a lot of that is right there. I'm impressed by people that are getting into business. When you're getting into agriculture, you're getting into a big, complicated business. And the leadership I saw last night in Polk County gave me the satisfaction of thinking these folks are going to do, really well. And obviously we have to address taxes on the state level. And I could go on for 15 minutes about things that we could be doing, but I want to come back and stress two things. We have to address and embrace technology, and we have to make access to capital possible for people getting into farming.
Appreciate that very much. Again, if folks have questions, again, feel free to type them in. Senator, I know one of the questions that is still and quite large on the minds of producers across the country have been the cost of inputs, whether it be fertilizer or fuel. What is happening obviously overseas impacts that, but talk a little bit about, you can hit inflation in there too if you'd like, but certainly the cost of inputs in agriculture is a great concern. Talk a little bit about what you would do, or is there anything Congress can do to address some of those concerns?
Well, as it relates to fuel and energy, I have been supportive of the Keystone XL pipeline from the minute they built the first pipeline, and we threw a huge Chamber of Commerce party for the pipeline workers in 2009. I worked in the legislature to reroute that so that we could continue to have the Keystone XL pipeline. And in fact, up until a year ago, I thought it was going to happen. And there's really no good excuse as to why it didn't happen. Keystone XL pipeline was going to provide us not only, crude oil from our nation's best trading partner, Canada, but also keep it on the North American continent. As it relates to inputs, and I'm no policy expert here, and I want to be clear, I have learning to do when it comes to ag policy. I don't hold myself out as an expert at all, and I am a listener and a learner. But I find it interesting that when the commodity prices were so good, and people were moving back to the farm at the beginning of 2010, 2011, 2012, when we saw corn at $7 and people were moving back in my district to Tilden, Nebraska and repopulating the school, the input costs went up. And then when prices got ugly in the mid-decade, the input prices were still where they were at. And so I think that the federal government has to create farm programs that work for producers. The one that I think we don't talk about enough, but it's probably the best federal program, and it doesn't address your input question, but it's federal crop insurance. There is no more federal program that I think is more necessary and protects the industry better, especially those that are borrowing, than federal crop insurance. And I would be a strong supporter of making sure that safety net was there, because no one controls the weather.
Appreciate that very much. One of the questions we received in the past, and again, folks can type them in if they'd like, but I know one of the questions we've had is, obviously the value of ag exports equals around 30% of the state's total ag receipts. At the same time, there's always concern, I think, from producers on what we input and some of the competition that exists there, specifically on the beef side. And obviously we export a lot, but we import some too. We export quite a bit, or import quite a bit as well. So what would you do if elected to expand overseas markets, or maybe address some disparities that exist on the trade front?
Well, I'm interested in free but fair trade, and my first real exposure to foreign trade was learning about the steel industry, being a representative of Norfolk, and how South Korea was dumping lower grade steel on the American market and making our steel less valuable and less desirable. I will tell you, when it comes to agriculture, I want to be a brand ambassador. I am far from an isolationist. I believe in free trade. I want American products sold around the globe. I admire our federal delegation when they are going to Israel and they are working on opening markets for Nebraska beef. They're working to open markets for Nebraska ag products. At my core, I'm an advocate. I'm a business person that's a small town attorney that knows how to go to bat for the people that I represent. And I would do that for all of the agricultural products in Nebraska. I would want to serve on the ag committee. I would also want to spend a lot of time listening. I've put together an ag advisory group of different folks throughout the 1st Congressional District. And, I'm a note taker. I took 15 pages of notes. I'm just listening and learning. And I think I have a lot more of that to do if I'm elected. But I also think there's an opportunity for people to be heard and, to go to bat on the things that matter. I'm interested in spending my time on things that will accomplish something, so that when I come back to the first congressional district, I can make a list of what we accomplished and not just what we talk about.
Appreciate that all very much. Again, if folks have questions, feel free to type them in. I know, Senator, one of the questions, and this is one of those dual questions that hit both federal and state level, or kind of the trickle down effect here, where we have recently significant dollars passed, whether it be the infrastructure package or even the omnibus spending bill that was just working its way through Congress here this week, that included a lot of money for rural broadband expansion and pretty significant funding there. Talk a little bit about that issue and how we can, or how you can, work better to make sure that expansion happens in the right way, and that we can get some real broadband, internet, cell phone service, whatever it is, going within the rural parts of the state.
Well, one thing I'll tell you about broadband, and this tells you how far behind some parts of Nebraska are. If you walk into a room and you ask people, can everybody here use their cell phone on the highways that they travel in their daily life? And we aren't even to the level where everybody can raise their hand and say that. And so when I think about connectivity, my first question is, can you use your voice cell phone when you're out and about in rural Nebraska? And the reality is, sadly, the question is no. As it relates to the broadband money, I've been fiercely active on this issue because I think we're wasting a lot of the federal dollars. We have the standard set so that if so many people in a census block have 25/3 service, 25 down, 3 meg up, that according to the federal government, that's sufficient. That gets us nowhere. You can't do your homework on that and watch videos or take video classes when you are suffering from 25/3 service. So we need to expect more out of two agencies. The Federal Communications Commission. As a radio station person, TV station person, I know that agency. I know that we need a better federal standard. It should be 100 up and 100 down. That's what we've set it at in the Nebraska legislature, and that's what the federal government should set it at. And we should remind people that it's not about overbuilding towns that already have internet. The hardest spots to get internet to, believe it or not, in my district, are about 3.5 miles north and west of Norfolk. People that live on the farms, or 7 miles south and west of Norfolk, they have literally no internet. You would think that they would, being closer to a populated area. They're trying HughesNet, they're trying everything. They're interested in Elon Musk Starlink. They don't have anything. And so we have to have either fiber to the premises or a fixed wireless that works. And when I say fixed wireless, if you're going to put some kind of receiver on your roof, you should get 100 meg up and 100 meg down. It shouldn't be a deal where only 1 or 2 people in the house can be on their computer at a time. Because if you're like my family, I've got one son that's watching YouTube. I've got one that's watching Netflix. I'm in one room watching something else, and my wife's doing something on her computer. And if you 4 can't be on it at that time, this doesn't work. That's just the standard. So I would change the standard, the federal standard, to be what we really need. And I would make sure we're not giving money to the same providers that keep overbuilding towns that already have internet. It sounds great to somebody in Washington when you say, oh, we're going to put internet in David City. Well, David City itself probably has an internet. But what about a few miles away and right in between David City and Rising City? How are you going to connect the people in that rural area? And that's what I'm really interested in. And I think that's what we have to hold ourselves to the standard, and then ask them if they can use their cell phone and do something about that.
Appreciate that all very much. Really appreciate that. Again, as folks have questions, feel free to type them in. I've got another question here, and we have just time for a couple more questions here, I guess. This is more of a comparative question in terms of what life is like in the Nebraska legislature versus maybe what life will be like in Congress and the House of Representatives. Senator Flood, talk a little bit. I mean, you obviously have a goal and appreciate your goal of getting things accomplished. Congress is quite a bit different than the Nebraska legislature. Talk about your plan to navigate through that and trying to get things accomplished where me as a person who studies federal policy and works through federal policy, and I'm if elected, I'd talk to you a lot. I make too many jokes about Congress not getting anything done. Talk a little bit about that for us, please.
Well, there's two different parts to my answer. The first one is I would do what has worked for me in the legislature. Being a member of a legislature means that you're in a branch that I think requires more skill than it takes to be in the executive branch, because if you're successful, you're advocating and influencing other people to vote the way you want them to vote. And what I did when I got to the legislature when I was 29 is I went and I kept my mouth shut and I listened and I spent as much time as I could with my colleagues. And I'm somebody that is I'm very much an extrovert. I enjoy spending time with other people. If my colleagues were going to lunch, I was going to lunch. If they were eating peaches, if Ed Schrock was going to eat peaches and cream at 8:30 on a Monday night, him and me and Jim Cutterback would sit there and I would listen to them talk about how the legislature ran. After 2 years, I had gotten to know my colleagues and they elected me Speaker of the legislature. And at the time I was the youngest speaker in the nation. And I was the longest serving speaker in Nebraska history, second youngest by a month. So I would use those same skills of working with people to get to know my colleagues if I were elected to Congress. But the second part of my answer is that I recognize that Congress is different than the legislature. Congress is partisan, and I'm a Republican, and I will work within the party system to be successful. And that means understanding that you come in and you work hard and you advocate for the principles of the party, which I support. If we're working on border security, I'm going to be a very active member of Congress on border security. I'm going to involve myself in the national discussion on behalf of our constituents, listening to the people of the 1st Congressional District. And I will operate in a partisan environment to make sure that I'm doing the best job. If I'm not successful, my constituents aren't successful. And when they come to Washington and men and women present me with problems that we have or opportunities that we have, I want to be able to say, well, I know the member in this state. I'm going to introduce you to them. Let's spend time working on this. Let's have you back out to Washington, or let's bring somebody to Lincoln, or let's bring somebody to Norfolk or Columbus. I will use my skills that I've learned as a legislator and I will advocate. And I do recognize that it's different, but at the end of the day, being in Congress is a people business and being a legislator is a people business. And that's something I get energy from and enjoy.
Appreciate that very much. We've got time for one more question, and it comes from one of our folks here. Obviously, we talked about broadband already. It's a whole other component of rural development with that, whether it be water treatment facilities or housing and daycare and all those types of things. Rural areas obviously have some farm bill funding. They have different funding sources that exist. But talk a little bit about how to continue to advance rural America. A little more general question, but talk a little bit about how to advance rural America and some things that we need to do outside of maybe just the broadband conversation to continue to grow the rural places of our state and the rest of the country.
Well, I love that question. So the reason I got back into politics in 2018 is that I started working on a plan to address the depopulation of counties like Stanton and Madison and Pierce, counties that we all are familiar with. And I was looking at the population trends, and quite frankly, they're not good. The reality is that when you look at the data, the people that are leaving our communities are in their 20s. But if you are 30 years old and living in Stanton, Nebraska, or in Lee or Clarkson, or in Platte Center, Humphrey, you're not leaving, because we have built a quality of life that works very, very, very good if you're married with a couple of kids. And if you are over the age of 30, when you look at the data, you're not likely to leave. So where I've focused my attention is, how do we retain those 20-year-olds that finish up at the community college or the university, or they get their first job and they end up finding somewhere else to live. The reality is, and we spent a lot of time looking at this, and I worked with UNO on it, young people in general decide by the age of 25 where they're going to live. And that means that if we're going to be successful, we have to make sure that when somebody gets out of the University of Nebraska with their ag degree, that they are connected to the communities that they came from or rural communities in the state. And to address that, in my hometown, we've set up a scholarship program through the state of Nebraska with Wayne State College, where we will have 75 college seniors living and working in downtown Norfolk around each other in 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026. And you want to know how many people applied for that scholarship this year? 240 high school students, which tells me that these high school kids want to live in our rural communities. They just want a plan on where they're going to work. And we have been raising the gold that the rest of America wants to hire. If you go to California and you tell them, I grew up on a dairy farm in Nebraska, you get the job before anybody else, because they know you have the grit, the tenacity, the perseverance. You have what it takes to be successful. And so what we need to do is we need to get our kids into these universities. We need them to spend their senior year in our rural communities, just like we're doing in Norfolk. And we need to introduce the jobs to the folks in the rural communities. And that's all kind of jobs. That's ag tech, that's agriculture, that's business finance, that's financial services. We need to create those jobs, and we need to place them in communities that we would have otherwise never thought of. And I'm in Columbus tonight. I was just talking to Renee Mueller, who's a very active businesswoman here, and she and I are on the exact same page. She said, why are we not using the blockchain for the Register of Deeds? We could create so many jobs by creating businesses like that, and making sure that our deed system was perfect, without all of the additional costs we have now. I am for innovation, and I am for bringing kids back, and I have a record of doing that in Norfolk. And I think if you look at what we've done there, go to growingtogetherne.com, you'll see the plan that we've put together. I authored that, and I'm carrying it out as a member of the legislature. And I want to take that same plan and that experience to Washington.
All right, very good. Senator Flo, we appreciate you very much joining in. Real quick, before I turn it over to President McCarg to close us out here, where can folks connect with you? Website, social media, that type of stuff.
They can go to MikeFloodForNebraska.com, or they can go on Facebook to Mike Flood for Congress. And I will make one brief, short comment before I get off here, and that is to say, I really respect the process Farm Bureau goes through when considering an endorsement. I have been to Dodge County, Madison County, Lancaster County, Polk County last night. I'm sure I'm missing some of the counties I've been to, but you are truly a grassroots organization. And what I've asked Farm Bureaus to do in my district in my area, is I've said, I'd like you to take a chance on me. Regardless of what choice you make, I do very much respect that you're truly a grassroots organization, and your members are well-educated and are familiar with dealing with candidates. And you've asked the best questions that I've gotten on the campaign trail so far. So thank you for that. And I look forward to learning of where you go. And I look forward to earning the nomination in May.
Appreciate it very much, Senator Flood. President McCarg, go right ahead and close us out.
Well, I thank you, Senator Flood. Appreciate it. I just wanted to thank everyone for, hang on. True. I want to thank everybody for taking the time. We've got a good list of participants on here tonight, and I appreciate your involvement, because we can't do a good job in this process if you as our members aren't involved. And so I look forward to how this is going to move forward, and really all across the state. Our staff is doing a tremendous job organizing these events all across the state for all of our legislative districts, this forum as well. So want to make sure and give a shout out to them. And again, thank you for being on. Thank you for the good questions. I think that shows just the value and the expertise that we have here in Farm Bureau. And I appreciate it. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for being on.